And gentlemen, the show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to the True Pop Culture 7 show. I'm your host, True Pop, here to laugh and think about pop culture stupidity. Well, in this case, just one stupidity of a movie, but either case, I've got with me John CJC. How are you, mate?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for stepping in. And Capital Opinions, how you doing, mate?
Hello, that's me. How's it going? I'm doing well. Good to be here.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately,
Talk
fellas,
about this movie. Oh man, is it so much fun? Such a fun movie. It's gonna be so fun. There's one word to describe this movie. It's fun. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good group of lads. Yes, thank you, Bestline. Thank you. We are some good lads. Fun is the word used like so. Definitely. I don't know about you guys, but I was looking for this was my most anticipated film of the year.
I was pretty excited for it. Pretty, reasonably excited for it. I watched the first one again a week or two before this one came out, and I was like, you know what, Joker, it's a pretty good movie. Hopefully the second one is good too. I was definitely more excited than a lot of people about the prospect of it being a musical, because I like musicals, and I thought, this could be pretty hip because Joker 1 is already something of a closeted musical, I would say. It's like it's almost there. It kind of wants to be deep down. You can feel it. And so I was like, you know what? This is going to be pretty cool. The trailer was great. And so, yeah, I was pretty excited.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I was on board with the idea of the sequel being a musical as well, given that like Arthur dancing in the first one is kind of an iconic image. And in terms of his development, that sort of helps facilitate him becoming the Joker. So cranking that up to 11 into a full-blown musical, I actually thought was a pretty good idea.
Yes.
I was on board with Lady Gaga's casting as well. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I am of the complete same mind with you two. Although, unlike Cap, I have a love and hate relationship with musicals. I find them sometimes just, kind of fillery, kind of, okay, I get it. You're feeling romantic about this guy. Like, okay, I get it. You feel annoyed about this guy. Move on with the song. Have it be quicker,
I think it's worth saying that I like the good ones.
Yeah.
There's plenty of bad ones, plenty of mediocre ones, but
True.
When they're good, they're great.
I think what usually makes musicals tolerable for me is when they move the plot forward as opposed to like just cranking the brakes on it so we can do this music piece for like 3-4 minutes and then it's like back to the story. Like
as opposed to this movie.
Yeah, like I always think of the Elton John biopic Rocket Man, the way they did the musical, and it's like not only do the musical set pieces advance the plot forward, but they function as transitions across like massive time jumps, like to different eras of his life. Like if Joker did something like that with them sort of wreaking havoc on Gotham, I think that could have been cool. But I don't want to jump too far ahead.
I would just add one little tiny thing there is that even if they didn't advance the plot specifically, and we did what a lot of musicals do where we're just sort of elaborating on character feelings and motivations and stuff like that, things that are already present in the scene, and then we're using that as a jumping off point for a song that doesn't necessarily move anything forward, but still, puts a little razzle dazzle on it. If the story was good, I wouldn't mind if the musical numbers didn't push it ahead. I mean, I can think of a lot of musicals where the songs, there aren't big events that happen in the songs themselves, but the story is good enough that I'm fine with we're just having a little fun, a little icing on the cake, if you will.
Exactly. It does work like ice skating, and it's just like what good is the icing going to do if it's on top of shit? You know?
That's a good question.
Yeah, well, there's just no momentum. If you were to strip
Yes.
away all the musical parts, you're left with a plot that's just sort of so stationary.
Yeah.
Like I had my high hopes when they escaped the institution. It's like, okay, now it's like we're into Act 2, it's carnage. But they just get recaptured, and then it's just about him waiting for his court date and him sitting in court bored. And it's just like, oh my god, dude.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
So then the
thing is-
musical's on top of that, where it's just like, fuck, nothing is moving here. Like,
Yeah. Right. Before we'd still talk about before the movie released. So I was again okay with it being a musical. I'm like, fine. There was plenty of dancing. There was plenty of music, and I really don't understand people criticizing this for being a musical. Like in the last movie, he was singing and dancing, but you draw the line at singing. Are you stupid? Like, come on, it fits.
Well, it's even there's a little bit of singing at the end, right? Arthur kind of
he does.
Sings a little bit. There's also when the frat Wall Street bro guys, before they start beating him up, one of them starts singing as well.
Yeah,
It's just a little. It's I like calling it a closeted musical because that's what it feels like to me. But it's there. All the seeds are there.
Exactly. So loads of people are like on Twitter, starting to hate Twitter more and more. Just pointing out, like posting like a musical scene with one. I think it was the one where he tap dances.
I like that
saying,
one.
And they're saying like, "What is this cringe?" and blah blah blah. It's just like, what is wrong with this scene particularly? There are plenty of other stuff to criticize apart from him tap dancing. Is that the best thing you could come up with?
Honestly, that's some of my favorite stuff in the movie, just because the story was so. We'll call it underwhelming. I think we could be even harsher than that. But
yeah,
if it weren't for that, I think I quite liked. I thought his tap dancing was pretty good for someone who's definitely not a professional dancer, and that's one of the better musical numbers in the movie. Outside of how it affects the story, just in terms of the energy of it. Yes, I mean, look, if they don't like the music, it's hard to argue with them, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I wish they would just say, "I don't like musicals. What is this?" rather than just making it look like actual criticism. Like, no, it's just your own subjective view. Don't blame it on this that it's bad. There's plenty of other stuff to criticize. And yeah,
I think apart from like the seeds that Joker 1 planted in regard to the sequel becoming a musical, just the Joker character himself is a very sort of darkly jovial character with a lot of showmanship. So it's not exactly a stretch to make a musical about that character. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. It just, I don't know, it seems to me, because to nicely transition us, people hate this movie for different reasons. You know, some people don't like musicals, you know, and they kind of say, "What is this cringe?" Some people like us, for instance, like thinking people, don't like how the way it's written. And on this topic, I wanted to just share a interesting score, Rotten Tomatoes, because that is a credible meter, I suppose. Very rarely seen. 33% for critics and 31% for audiences. So that is amazing.
So if you click on it,
which one would you want me to click?
So the way they do it, you probably already know this, but for those who don't, the critic score is not weighted the same as the audience score. The audience score is actually the average out of 10 or out of 100 in this case, but the critics score is just the percentage of people that gave it a 6 or 10 or above. But they do tell you what the actual average score is, and if you click on it, in the case of Joker, it has a 5 out of 10. Which is still pretty low, especially compared to the first movie. Yeah, if you go to all critics, you'll see the that's more like what you would see on IMDb, for example.
Yep.
But I just big pet peeve of mine, the way Rotten Tomatoes does things. But
no, the Rotten Tomatoes is shit. I'm only using it because people People know it. It's the
No,
most
it's
famous
fine.
one.
It's fine to reference it. I just like to point out that specific thing because sometimes it's like, oh, it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, but if everyone gave it a 6 out of 10, it would get 100.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
that's interesting. I wasn't aware that the critic score was weighted like that. And
Yeah.
like I don't think the site is or not valuable. Like I usually check the ratio, between audience.
You can
and
learn a lot
critic.
from it for sure. But yeah, the simple way to describe the critic score is that's the percentage of people that gave it a thumbs up, and that can be anything from a 6 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. So
Right.
it's weird. I don't know why they chose to do it that way, but that's the way they've done it.
Yeah.
The scores have not been good.
Right.
You can say that.
So my question is then, it's understandable why audiences would dislike this movie, for all sorts of reasons. But why would critics? I would have thought critics would like this movie.
Well,
strange. Like overwhelmingly like it.
I'm not. Well, I think it doesn't surprise me too much because, okay, first of all, a lot of critics didn't like the first one, and I wouldn't expect them to like this one any better for reasons that we'll get into when we talk about the story. But this one isn't going to win those people over, I don't think. I think it has a lot of for the people that really hate Joker 1, and man, the discourse around that movie was just wild. I don't think they're going to be won over by this one. So you have the people who liked Joker 1 who are disappointed by this movie for a host of reasons. And then you have the people that already didn't like the first one not being won over. So I think that's seems to be why the score is so low, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're definitely right. It's the reaction to these Joker movies are always interesting,
And
a
lot of interesting takes, that's for sure.
Yeah. One more reason where we can measure reactions is the box office numbers, which is also interesting because 200 million was spent on this, and so far it's
wild. That's wild.
It doesn't look like a 200 million movie.
No.
Yeah, not really. Maybe 100. If someone said it was 100, I'd probably believe that more easily. Because they spent a lot on some of these sets for the big musical numbers. They look like they put their money into those, but 200 million?
Maybe it went into the catering. Who knows?
I don't know. Like, did Joaquin Phoenix say, I won't do it another one unless you pay me a lot of money this time? I don't know. That wouldn't surprise me too much, but
I mean, like whenever RDJ gets like a pay cut, it's always like reported on. But I never saw any news articles saying that he was gonna get paid bank on the sequel.
Yeah, I don't know. But what was the first one? 50 million? The budget?
50 million. Yeah.
So 50 million to 200 million. That's
4 times as much. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It definitely it's not 4 times as much production value on screen. Definitely not. Yeah. The first one's a pretty good looking movie. Like, it doesn't look like they spared any expense really.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The thing is, what we have to consider is you have to double that budget to, think about marketing costs. And right now it's made 113 million. That number is going to half by next week, and then going to half again by next weekend. So it's going to make less and less as time moves on, as we all know with box office numbers. So it needs to make like $500 million, basically,
to be a a real throbbing success. Yeah, it needs to. This is a box office disappointment for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the drop off is even more steep than that, just because word of mouth is letting everyone know just how dull and disappointing this film is.
And depending on your perspective, insulting to the first one. That opinion can vary a bit, but certainly a lot of people think that this is an insult to the first one and the fans of it. So that's not going to be good for the second week drop off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just in uni in like a lecture, and one of the guys said that like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch Joker 2," and like, "How did you find out?" And I was like, like the word of mouth is bad. It is absolutely terrible. So, that was the context basically. and safe to say it wasn't good. Justin Martins gifted 5 True Pop Culture Center memberships. Thanks, Martins.
Way to go, Justin.
Damn.
Regardless of... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go on.
Regardless of what people think of the character or the memery of the first one and this sort of, the messaging that some people take from it, like people liking it for the wrong reasons or whatever, like the fact is, aside from all that, the second one is just boring. Like it's really like a boring film is like the worst.
And the first one just held my attention, even made me tense at the edge of my seat at times. I remember watching it in the cinema, and I was just absolutely glued. And walking away from that film, and I was like, that was pretty good actually, because walking into Joker 1, I'm a kind of a nerd, comic book nerd. It's just like, Joker's not really meant to have an origin story. He isn't supposed to have a name. What are you doing, DC? Are you just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks? That kind of approach. So it's just like I wasn't expecting that much, but I walked away liking it way more than I thought I would. And the second one, well, it just makes the first one seem like it was done by accident. Did you not understand what you made in the first place? Like, I got this feeling watching the second one. Like, did you even understand what you made? Because I was so confident this was going to be good because it's got same writer, same director, same main actors, freaking Lady Gaga's in it, same composer. You have the same ingredients, the same chef, and you've screwed up the dish. To me, that was just how is this possible?
For me, where they really went wrong the most is in the story, because I do think a lot of the rest of the elements are still pretty good. The acting is still quite good. The score, I was very impressed by the score, and especially the arrangements of some of these, because it's a jukebox musical. So I don't believe there were any truly original songs in the whole movie, but they were arranged in a way that they felt like they were in the same musical world as the score.
Yes.
And I was impressed by that. Like, some of these old Frank Sinatra songs, but they have that sort of edge, they have that really ripping cello underneath it and really kind of gives it a slightly more sinister feel. All that sort of stuff I think was pretty good. The set design, a lot of that was good, but it's just the story. The story is the weakest part, and at least for me, it's the most important part. So it doesn't, it's not, the writing is definitely not helping out anyone else who is giving their all and, giving all their talent and hard work and time for this movie.
Yep. JS Pena says, I'm honestly not surprised this movie sucks. I mean, come on, guys, the sequel to Todd Phillips movie. I have not watched other Todd Phillips movies, I'll be honest.
Well, they're, they can be pretty good. I like the first Hangover movie quite a bit. I mean, so the sequels to the Hangover movies get memed on, so maybe that's sort of what he's getting at, that he's not good with sequels or follow-up movies. That might be true. I actually haven't seen the Hangover sequels, but I think there's no reason to assume this would fall off as hard as it did.
Yeah.
I think that the problem with the Hangover sequels for me is that they have tonal issues. They all of a sudden become much darker, whereas the first one was so lighthearted. And so that actually gave me hopes for him working on Joker, because I felt like he finally found his footing, like a project that fits him, where he can do like sort of black comedy, but also tell like a dark story. Yeah. I think by Hangover 3, he wanted to do that. And now it's just like, great, you're in charge of Joker. So
you have a better vehicle for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, definitely. Right then. Do you guys want to get started on the very first scene? And I already have problems, to be honest.
The cartoon?
Yes. Don't get me wrong. The cartoon is technically well done. But it presents a story that I'm like thinking, where did you get this idea, movie? That Joker has a split personality. That's what the cartoon is getting at. And I fundamentally disagree with that.
Yeah, did not like the cartoon at all in terms of
Now,
the story it tells. It's like a weird summary of the last movie, but
as I was watching this in the cinemas, I was like, okay, to play devil's advocate, maybe what this cartoon is presenting isn't necessarily true. It's just a defense strategy, the defense attorney strategy, and that's being presented in the cartoon. That's what they want to show. But it's not specifically true. But the movie just seems to really support this idea throughout the whole thing.
Until the end.
Until the end. Yeah.
I would say the ultimate conclusion seems to be no, it's not a split personality. That's just what his defense was. But it's kind of like, that's obvious from the first frame of the movie. If you watch the first one, you're like, no,
exactly.
Of course not. So it makes sense as a strategy on his lawyer's part. Like I can buy that she's going for the not guilty by reason of insanity defense. But this cartoon is not something that exists in the world of the story. It's just a weird thing thrown in front that seems to want to recontextualize what happened in the first movie in a very confusing, ill-advised sort of way that isn't true. I don't know what purpose it serves. If all it's meant to set up is what the defense's strategy is going to be, just cut it. Just cut it from the movie. I really don't understand what it's doing here.
I have a more positive opinion of the cartoon, to be honest. It actually didn't. It feels a little out of place, but I think with a movie like Joker, like a sequel to something like Joker, I can understand opening with something that's a little bit bonkers, and this, and the fact that it's Warner Brothers as well, and then the obviously suggesting the ideas of the Jungian shadow, right? And then also the fact that cartoons, a classic like cartoon comedy staple, is a shadow acting independently. I've seen that in a lot of different cartoons, right? So I like that it did that, had that silly, recognizable quality, but also it suggested to me that it was going to do something thematically sophisticated in the remainder of the film.
But it didn't.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
Yeah, my objections are mostly to the story it tells. Rather than the inclusion of a wacky Warner Brothers retro cartoon at the beginning, because that could have been neat. I think, it's weird. What it's trying to say is, I would say, confusing at best, the movie as a whole. But
well, I wonder if the point of the cartoon is to be a bit confusing and ambiguous as to whether or not it's establishing that the shadow is a separate thing, or like at some point in the cartoon, the shadow like fills his clothes completely, suggesting that he is entirely the shadow, and the other thing is not even a part of him at that point. But then, like, he runs back, like the original Arthur, like runs back in and sort of fights with his shadow to completely sort of fill his persona back up. And it's like, okay, so like the film doesn't know which is which, and I guess the ambiguity is the point. And like as the movie goes on, this is gonna be an exploration of that idea.
Maybe, yeah.
There's stuff they could do with this. It kind of reminds me. Okay, this is gonna be a stupid reference because I doubt anyone here is like on top of Five Nights at Freddy's. It kind of reminded me of one of the games where they have like, all these very vague, confusing lore pieces, and they're kind of like puzzles. And sometimes there's like a cartoon, like in the Joker, illustrating some grand theme or plot, like some kind of clue, like the key to the story. And once you figure out that cartoon, it kind of explains a larger plot. But this cartoon didn't do that. If anything, I agree with Cap. It made things more confusing. I'm not opposed to having a cartoon, and but because of the very confused writing throughout the film, I just think you're starting on a bad foot already. But yeah, what happens next? Yes, we're basically shown Arkham Asylum. Now, here's another criticism of mine. I think Arkham Asylum was kind of shit. Like from the comics, there's a lot of story behind Arkham Asylum. Like it's very gothic in its look, very haunting. You know, it's literally, it looks like a something from a Halloween movie.
It's Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah. You could have all sorts of cameos for different Batman villains, and it doesn't have to be like the popular ones. Just more, could have like more vague Batman villains, like, you know, the guy with the puppet, for instance. So any number of things. There's, with Arkham, you have a lot of possibilities opening to you, and a lot of aesthetic possibilities as well. And to me, it just felt like a standard mentally ill hospital. You know, there wasn't really anything, any uniqueness to it. I don't know about you guys.
It felt appropriate enough to the world of the first movie, just in terms of set design and everything. I suppose it's a little weird that there's like a maximum security wing and then the other wing where people can just kind of come and go, and they're so close together. But yeah, I don't know. It didn't bother me as much. I'm not a big comic book nerd, really, you know, so I'm just sort of thinking about how it follows on from the first movie. And the first movie is very much full of places that are just kind of dimly lit and are gross. And not derelict, but, you know, they're falling apart a bit. And I thought it fit that vibe.
Yeah, I think the Joker, the first Joker movie, is exceptionally grounded in relation to like other Batman films. Like The Batman, for instance, Matt Reeves' movie really leans into the Gothic architecture, you know, especially Wayne Manor. It's almost like who the fuck would live here? It looks like it looks too spooky, you know. So I like the sort of toned down look of Arkham as more of just a realistic hospital. I think actually works for me.
I'd say so too, generally. Yeah.
I would like some Gothic. I think the perfect example of like a Gotham, let's say, would be like in the Batman or Batman Begins. But there's kind of more like a, you know, atmosphere to it. It's more memorable. Well, this hospital is just gonna go down my memory hole. I wanted something more like a distinctive look to it. You know, I'm not saying make it incredibly 100% comic book accurate, just something to it. To me, it felt very vanilla, you know? Yeah, so I'm a bit disappointed by that. But hey, so we're basically we're introduced to Arthur in the hospital. He's not laughing. Is that because of his medication?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, we start with what his everyday is like in Arkham, and he's not talking and he's not laughing. He's definitely not where he was at the end of the first movie. Now, I've seen some people call this a sort of major regression. Some of that I think you could attribute to the fact that he's on his medication again. They make a specific point of showing that he's on his medication here. He wasn't at the end of the first movie, and he'll go off it later in this movie. I don't know if that fully explains how. I guess I don't. We don't really know anything about the medications he's on or anything. But he's very quiet. He's very, you know. The implication is that he has some sort of camaraderie with the guards. They like him to a degree, despite the horrible things he's accused of doing. They make it seem like usually he'll tell them jokes. They're like, "Hey, you got a joke for us today?" But on the day we first,
they say that like 4 times. Like, I get it. He tells jokes. All right, maybe you don't have to hold my hand for that one.
The implication seems to be that normally he tells them jokes, but he's not on the day we see him at the very beginning of the movie. I'm not really sure why. It's not necessarily a criticism. I'm just trying to understand how he ends up here. I guess this is just wearing him down is the implication. He's been here for, it's not entirely clear unless I missed it. He's been here for a while. There's been enough time to make a TV movie about what happened to him. So he's been here at least a few months. Seems to be wearing him down. He's definitely not where he was at the end of the last movie.
The role of his laughter and his medication is a bit confusing with the sequel, because in the first one, the way it clearly seemed to work to me is that the medication isn't helping with his laugh because he's on his meds at the beginning.
Yeah.
And he laughs on the bus. And if you pay attention to the scenes in Joker 1 where he laughs, it's a stress response, right?
Yes.
So he's making faces to the kid. He's not laughing at first, but then the mother scolds him. And then he's stressed, and then he starts laughing, right?
Yeah.
On the train as well, when he sees the Wayne Enterprise employees harassing the woman's looking at him, and all of a sudden he feels a pressure to do something, but he doesn't want to because he's scared, and then he's stressed, and then he starts laughing, right? Here, it's like he's on his meds, but he's not laughing, I guess, because he doesn't feel stressed in prison. I mean, there's that one part where he's outside and he's laughing. So I guess he was feeling stressed about something there. Maybe he's on new meds that sort of have finally suppressed his laughing issue. I'm not really sure. It's all of a sudden it's like muddy with the sequel.
Exactly, because that was really engaging, interesting to watch. His laugh, it was kind of like a involuntary, completely. Like once he did, it was painful for him to stop at one point. In some points in the first Joker film. And in here, I don't see it emphasized that much, which is a shame because that was a really interesting aspect.
Yeah, they really toned that down, and I'm not sure why. And then like you said, when it does happen, it, with maybe a couple exceptions, it doesn't really seem to follow on from anything or seem to be motivated by any particular stressful situation. It's just now here's a shot of him outside cackling. It's like, oh, right, he does that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The Butter Anvil says, banger guest. Why, thank you, Butter Anvil. They're a pleasure to always have on there. Great to talk with. About the laugh. I think I can name like one example where he's about to be sentenced. You know, he has his like reading guilty on all charges and blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the parents grabs him and asks him like what, or shouts at him, "Why are you laughing?" And then the bomb goes off. But that's much later in the film. I think that's one example.
Yeah, but that one works at least to a degree.
But why don't you do that more throughout the film? Like, why can I only name one example here? You know, it's strange.
It is strange, and I'm a little confused at what we're meant to think about where he starts this movie, because it's almost like he got reset a little bit. The Joker 1 is a sort of darkly ironic self-actualization story in a way. It's demented, but he sort of does find power and confidence and a purpose. It's just kind of insane and fucked up. And then we start this movie, and almost all of that confidence and purpose and, identity he's found in this persona is suppressed completely. And then he has to get it back with Harley, only to lose it again. It's a very strange arc he goes on.
Right. Like there's a part missing in between that where you missed something.
I guess, or like I think I might have preferred it. I don't know if this is a criticism or just something I'd prefer more if he started the movie more like where he was at the end of the last movie, and then he slowly got worn down. If we're gonna sorry to jump ahead, but if we're gonna get to the point where he renounces his persona and sort of tries to distance himself from the effects he's inspiring in society because he's overwhelmed by them or he thinks they're horrible. If we're going to get to that point, maybe have him start where he was at the end of the last movie and slowly be worn down, perhaps. But then, but if you try that, what purpose is Harley serving exactly? I don't know. It's a complicated question, but it does feel strange to me.
Right. And I want to point out as well, like, a lot of people dislike this movie because it deconstructs the Joker character, Arthur Fleck. It takes away his persona, blah, 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 blah. Stuff that we have seen plenty of times with like Joel or Luke Skywalker or freaking Indiana Jones. We've seen it time and time again. The thing is, in this case, yeah, sure, you can do that, but you haven't done it very well in this movie. Like, sure, you can deconstruct them if you like, but you've not done the steps to do it. You haven't executed it very well.
That's
I think
that's
that's
what I
the
would
biggest issue. Yeah.
That's what I would say is that I think what the core idea is not bad on paper, but they horribly executed. That is, if I even have the right idea of what they were going for, it's a little hard to know.
Yeah,
some of the choices they make are kind of conflicting and contradictory. But what I think they were going for makes a certain kind of sense. But I think it's all in the execution. That's where they really bungled things.
Yeah. About the Joker personality, there are instances where people go to these jails or these hospitals and they turn into even worse people in a sense. They get involved with the wrong type of people and think they can get away with anything. I don't know, because I kind of want to criticize his decision. Okay, why are we deconstructing him per se? Would it not be more interesting to kind of say, okay, what does he do with this new way of life, this new philosophy that he has at the end of the first movie? What does he do that in this jail? Does he inspire maybe the prisoners to riot and stuff like that? That's what I was thinking was going to happen, especially with Harley being involved. But obviously they made the opposite approach of deconstructing him, which again it's I don't mind you taking that path, but you've botched it, like you said, Cap. But yeah,
I don't think I have as
yeah.
I don't think I have as much of a problem with the way it started, to be honest, because like at the end of Joker 1, you see him running away from the orderlies, but it's Arkham, and he probably didn't get away, and he was probably swiftly caught and recaptured.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Arkham geographically in the city, it's like Alcatraz. It's like in the middle of a body of water, and there's only one road going out. It's like the only way you can have somebody escape from Arkham is if some guard, like there's somebody on the inside helping a prisoner out. Otherwise, there's just no way. Like if the second movie opened with Joker just like having escaped and he's just out in the streets, like I wouldn't buy that, So if he's staying in Arkham, then it kind of makes sense to me that he would find a certain comfort in prison. That like if he's just out and about in society, that's a lot of pressure on him, and so he's more vulnerable to more prone to the laughing fits and all that. But in prison, it's sort of like every day is sort of the same crap, and I think he just feels beaten down, and so him becoming sort of muted kind of makes sense to me. And then by seeing that, I'm thinking, okay, by the end of this movie, the Joker persona is going to come back in a huge flamboyant way. But what it ends up doing is doing the exact fucking opposite of that.
Yeah.
I would almost, for the reasons you just said, I would almost expect him to be quite happy in prison. Or that's one way you could go with it. And that he actually finds some level of comfort in this. He has a positive relationship with the guards because he kind of makes them laugh a little bit.
No, and he was really struggling to connect with people in the first one.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd find some people to connect with in jail. You never know.
Yeah, because he does kind of find his mojo, you could say, by the end of the movie.
That should have been the subtitle. Joker finds his mojo.
Finds his mojo.
Yeah, I wouldn't want him to necessarily break out immediately or anything, but I'm not quite sure in the direction to have him sort of revert to the timid, quiet, worn down guy at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, he was a professional clown, was he? Wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
He worked at Ha-Ha's.
Yeah, so he's kind of an entertainer, so he could do card tricks, he could juggle, he could do all sorts of things to entertain all the prisoners here who are just bored and experiencing the same day every day. Isn't that what his goal was, to kind of...
I would expect his dark sense of humor to actually play a bit better in prison than it did on Murray's show. That joke he tells about it's the police, your son's been killed in a car accident, that might get some laughs in prison or with the guards than compared to the family talk show.
That's quite interesting. I like that he's sort of the prison clown that takes the stage and entertains all the
Yeah.
other criminals who are so loopy that they actually find him funny.
Yeah, the Joker card, the Jester. Yeah, he just makes people laugh. Yeah,
And I like the idea that the guards actually kind of like him to a degree.
Yeah.
You know, he's a model prisoner in some sense. You know, he's not shanking people. He's just being a goofball, and he's relatively earnest as long as no one's insulting or attacking him and all that sort of fun stuff. And I quite like Brendan Gleeson in this movie. I think he's fun.
Yeah.
So it started off okay, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Then for some reason, we're taken to a defense lawyer. They have a chat, especially about the two personality disorder. She really tries to kind of fit that puzzle piece in when it doesn't necessarily fit, but you know, whatever goes. The Joker has a habit of escaping out of Arkham for some BS reasons. So when that reasoning was kind of presented to me, I'm like thinking, he's going to get out on this, isn't he? Even though it's complete BS, I can see it working, this strategy. And that's why I thought, okay, maybe that's why, that's how this movie is going to end. Like him getting out on that defense strategy. That's a complete lie.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about the comics. So is Arkham exclusively a mental hospital for the criminally insane, or is it also just like a state hospital?
Mentally insane. Blackgate is for, you know, your standard criminals, but Arkham is for the insane people, and that's why I was like, come on, do something crazy with it.
Well, because assuming the laws are similar in Gotham as they are in real life, if he's found not guilty by reason of insanity, then he would still have to go to a mental hospital, probably one with decently high security. So would it almost make more sense if like he ends up in Arkham as a result of this defense working or something like that? True. Maybe, I don't know.
But then you have, you know, because originally Harley is a psychiatrist in Arkham.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's implied that she lets it. Never made sense to me, by the way, that I'm going to criticize the comics for once. That's a rarity. That a psychiatrist was manipulated by a prisoner and then lets him out. It's just like, you're the one with the psychiatrist degree. Shouldn't you be in control? But hey, what do I know?
I suppose it's all on how it's executed. I feel like that idea could work if he's very, very convincingly manipulative. You know, I could see that working. But
yeah, I mean, that is, to me, that's like a testament to how sophisticated a mind Joker has. You know what I mean? Like, he's the clown prince of crime. He's a criminal mastermind. So like somebody like him, I think it's cool that he has the skill set to win over his own psychologist, and then they end up like escaping together. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't do that in the movie. I don't know why they didn't have her as an employee at Arkham and just do the standard thing instead of making her this weird super fan that like makes up all this shit about herself.
Thing is, what they did with I'm actually happy with what they did with her, even though they didn't do anything with her. There's no payoff. I don't feel they used her enough. I feel like she was done good in here. I didn't mind her because Harley is usually a insufferable version of Deadpool in every other piece of modern media. I absolutely can't stand her, but in here, to me, she was
she's certainly less obnoxious than Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. That's for sure.
Yeah. I didn't mind her in this, and I wish she was used more. You know,
in terms of so she has Joker has the meeting with his defense lawyer, who's really pushing the strategy of, the Joker is like a split personality you have, and that's the one that did the crimes. You, Arthur Fleck, you would never hurt a fly. This is he's insane defense. Hopefully that will get him put in a mental hospital instead of given the death penalty. Those are the stakes. That's what she's after. That makes sense from her perspective. And he goes along with it at first because he doesn't want to get the death penalty. Sure. Then eventually we're going to do a thing where he's like, you know what? I'm tired of pretending I didn't do it, or I'm tired of apologizing for what I did. Kind of, he rejects this. He's eventually going to fire her. And then once he does, what is the point of anything in the trial? Is my question. This, like, in terms of the trial portion, which is a significant chunk of what this movie is, I think it's awful. It doesn't make any sense to me in terms of like what is he even arguing for once she's gone? I have so many questions because they get all sorts of weird details wrong. So after we've already established that he's not pleading innocent as if he didn't do it, or not guilty, I should say. He's not claiming he didn't do it. He's only claiming that he's not fit. He can't be. He's too crazy to be found guilty ultimately for his actions. We're still having witnesses come up who are saying, like, trying to prove and establish that he killed them. I'm like, we would have already done this at the very beginning. What are we doing? There's so many things. I'm a big fan of courtroom dramas when they're done well, and this is just terrible. There's so many things. Like, I'm jumping ahead, I'm sorry, but like when he eventually becomes his own lawyer and he's wearing the makeup, and
I was like, bullshit. Bullshit did they allow him wearing makeup? That's fucking bullshit.
Like, hey man, I'm not gonna let this turn into a circus. Like, you already did, buddy.
Yeah.
You did a few days ago. You let this turn into a circus. And then he's just allowed to approach the jurors. Like, he's accused of killing several people.
He's killed 5 people. One that he don't know about.
To walk around doing a weird Atticus Finch impersonation and just walk right up to the jurors. And like, I'm surprised none of them like recoiled away from him. Like, ugh, get away from me. None of the courtroom stuff really worked beyond the basics of his defense lawyers trying to claim he's crazy.
Yep. In those moments in particular, it just felt like, did you even watch the last movie you made that felt so realistic, so grounded, so tense? And in here, when he was doing the impression,
well, in isolation, that's funny.
It just felt goofy. Yeah,
it is goofy, and there's a certain level of goof that I'm totally cool with, but it's just all the surrounding context.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily against like having a chunk of the film dedicated to a courtroom thing, like Cap was saying. I mean, I like courtroom dramas as well if they're done well. And I'm like, why am I not liking this? It kind of made me think of, it's just kind of a bit off the map, but I thought of Casino Royale, the big card game in the middle. Everyone's just sitting around the table just playing cards, and that's not boring at all. I fucking love that whole sequence, but because things are happening, like every single card flip feels like, oh shit. This just feels like a dull recount of all the events in the first one. And I'm just sitting there going like, yeah, I remember that happened. Yeah, you don't need to show me these clips from the first movie. I remember.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I was just waiting for it to end. And yeah, that when he puts on that Southern accent, I was actually irritated watching that. I'm like, oh, stop doing that. Like, I guess I kind of get it, because like he feels like, oh, I'm stepping into this role that I normally wouldn't do, and I've seen courtroom dramas on TV like him, Arthur, and it's just like I feel like I got to put on this Southern thing because like this is they talk like this, right? This is how like prosecutors talk, but I just found it really annoying. Like, I wish he wouldn't do it.
It just makes him look stupid. Like, that's all it achieves. Really,
and the fact that this is being entertained in court, like you guys were saying as well, like the judge, as if somebody would look at this and be like, "I'll allow it." Like, like no, you'd be like, "I'm not fucking. We're not doing this.
I'll allow it, but you're
put him
walking
in cuffs,
nice, buddy."
Yeah,
buddy, watch yourself, buddy.
And then just to make it even worse, I'm not even sure what he's really aiming at this point. You know, when he's defending himself, he's already thrown her out because he doesn't like this not guilty by reason of insanity defense. So what is he even arguing? And when he's interviewing these people, he's just asking them random questions. Like, it's the stakes aren't clear because it's so obvious that he's going to be found guilty. You know, I never really got what happens if he's found not guilty by reason of his insanity. Have we even established that?
Yeah,
not really.
When he talks on the phone, like, "Hey, my verdict is tomorrow. Wish me luck," or whatever. It's like, Oh, please, you know it's going to be guilty on all charges. Why are we building anticipation towards the charges when we know they're all going to say guilty, guilty, guilty? It was just stupid. But
It
no,
seems
going
superfluous, but it's
Yeah.
also the real meat of the movie. It's I don't understand it.
Yep.
I do like the core dilemma of him, like, is his shadow self the real him? And like his Arthur Fleck is that sort of the secondary thing that needs to be sort of pushed out so he can just become Joker entirely, because that's what Lady Gaga's advocating for. And then the key to him escaping the death sentence is to admit that, oh, that was just a fabricated dark part of me that's not actually me. But like, just as the court case went on, it just became not only more dull, but just made less and less sense and became less and less believable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you see, go on.
No, I mean, that was, I mean, and on top of that, you have the fucking musical bits wedged in as if it wasn't slow and, you know, non-progressive enough already. Like, you have these set pieces thrown in, and it has some really cool, colorful action, like, you know, him beating the shit out of somebody with a stool or whacking the guy with a hammer. And I'm just like, that's cool, but it's not happening.
Yeah.
This is all in Arthur's head because he's fucking bored in court, like the audience is right now. They're just waiting for something to happen that's interesting.
I said this in my review, which I've pinned in the chat if people watching are interested, that it feels like a 30-minute epilogue to Joker, but stretched out to 2 hours and 18 minutes. It does feel like
a fourth act kind of thing.
yeah,
a little bit.
Like someone pumped it up with so much fat, so many musical numbers. It's just like, do you even have a movie here? Do you have a big enough idea to justify that runtime? And the answer is, of course not.
The epilogue comparison is really smart. That makes a lot of sense, because an epilogue is not really it's supposed to be sort of the aftermath of a plot line happening. And this does feel like that. It just feels like it goes nowhere.
Yep.
We're all just barreling towards, in terms of the trial, we're all barreling towards he's found guilty, because there's never really any reason to believe anything else is going to happen. But even if it did, what would that even mean? If he's found not guilty by reason of insanity, what does that even mean for his life? I guess in terms of what the arc of his character is, I suppose there's an idea there wherein he sort of sees the effect his persona is having on society, and then he gets kind of scared and overwhelmed by it, and eventually realizes, like, no, that's not me. I'm not that. I don't like the effect that's having on people. We get a little taste of that when he's eventually busted out and he sees, what other people are doing. But also, I don't feel we've earned that, because we also he saw the effect this had on people, and it tickled him in the first movie. He's like, oh, look at all this chaos I'm causing. And it's great. And he's dancing on the car watching this all happen. I don't feel like we really earned that switch at the end. But on paper, I suppose it's an interesting arc if you execute it well.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right. Because throughout the first Joker movie, he's just nothing. He has no effect on people. People literally, there's a line in there, like, people can just walk over him. And to see him having an effect on other people just makes them kind of happy, even though it's kind of twisted and painful in a way. He's happy that he's being noticed.
He thinks he's loved now.
Yeah.
He's never really experienced love in his life, and so he doesn't really know what it looks like. And then he sees this, and he thinks that's what it is.
Yeah. The thing is, what I wanted to mention as well is you could actually have a interesting little crossroads for Arthur Fleck. Two decisions that he can make. He can either A, go with the insanity defense. The Joker was never real. He can go back to a somewhat normal life in a mental hospital, getting better and blah, 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 blah. Or embrace the Joker fully. No backseas this time. Just go out there, start another riot from a TV interview or something like that, and get executed and die as Joker or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie doesn't really take
It almost tries to do
any
both.
different. Yeah,
Almost.
it doesn't almost. It doesn't really take any of those paths. It doesn't even give him that choice necessarily. It just seems incredibly muddled.
Because we do have the beat where he gets tired of pretending like the Joker isn't part of him and pretending like he blacks out when all that stuff happened. And he's like, no, I'm proud of that. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise, kind of thing. We have that beat where he sort of resumes the persona.
Was that in the Alan Partridge interview? I don't know what his name, but I think he played Alan
Steve
Partridge.
Coogan.
Steve Coogan, yeah. Was that in that interview, or where he's kind of like, you know what, I'm not gonna go with this insanity thing?
There's a bit of that there for sure. And then there's a bit of that when he fires his lawyer.
Yeah,
that's like that's the final moment where he's like, no, I'm not doing this whole the Joker is just some evil spirit that takes over me kind of thing, where I black out and I don't even remember that it happened. Like, I'm tired of pretending that that's not a part of me, and that's actually a part of me that I like to a degree. And then so we have that beat, and you think maybe that's the direction we're going, but then we're gonna rather quickly reverse back. And I feel like the motivation for reversing back was really underwhelming. Isn't it kind of ultimately there's the getting busted out of the courtroom when the bomb goes off, seeing those guys and hearing them talk about how they're going to burn everything down. That seems to frighten him a bit, even though that seemed to like tickle his fancy at the end of the last movie. And then ultimately his like friend, I'm putting in big air quotes because he didn't have a very strong relationship with him, but the friend he has in prison who gets killed, that seems to help motivate his turn back again. Also, question mark, there's a little bit, I don't know, there's a lot.
You say that now, but I'm like, did it?
I mean, I don't know what
it's not implied that strongly, you know? Like,
it's
sure he was his friend, but it's just like, was he really that attached to him? Was he really that sad to hear him pass away? It kind of seemed kind of numb to hear him die out.
We're jumping around a lot. I don't know if we want to establish some more of what happened before we try to make sense of it.
Yeah, we're hopping around. No, so he meets Harley. He gives him a BS story how she burned down her house. I think Arthur likes that story.
Yeah, so he ends up in a singing group because basically because
Brendan Gleeson wants
to join, essentially. That seems, and there's something kind of funny in that. There's a singing group, and so because he's a model prisoner, even though he's from the maximum security ward, he's allowed to join this singing group. Harley's a member of that. They have a conversation. She gives him a story where we'll later find out is exaggerated or fabricated, where she grew up in the similar neighborhood to him and is also a product of a broken home and a broken society and everything. Eventually, we're going to learn that she's actually from a wealthy family, and she just made up that story to bond with him.
I like that aspect.
Yeah, there's something interesting in that, I would say.
Because Harley is, she's the Bonnie and Clyde partner in crime. She's the super fangirl. I think, weirdly enough, this is a good iteration of Harley, more so than in other modern iterations. That adoration of Joker is on point. But in other comics, in other games as well, Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, she's kind of her own thing. I don't need the Joker anymore. I'm my own anti-hero.
Lame.
Which is stupid. So I kind of liked her being kind of this, creepy kind of super fan, completely telling a bunch of lies. So no, I liked Harley in this.
And I do like the choice to have that be some like a lie. That like really she was born rich, but she's obsessed with him because I wish we got a little more meat on the bones of what exactly she's obsessed with. Clearly, she's inspired by the Joker and the effect he has, at the end of the last movie, and that she was kind of born rich and that she kind of wants to see everything burn too. That's kind of that feels right to me. I don't know. That seems to fit. And I like that she would lie about it to claim to be from the same place. Later, she's going to say like, "Oh, I got us a place in your old apartment building," and he's like, "Why? I hated that place." Like, there's I don't know. She kind of, it's almost like a fetishization of his like upbringing in life. Then he's like, "Why would you do that? I hated that place." I don't know. There's little moments like that kind of work for me.
Yeah,
funny about
it. If only they did more of it, you know. It just goes nowhere. Okay, so then we get Harley Dent.
Sorry, just to add to that, goes nowhere by design. Like it's not an accident. I think that's what one of the things I dislike about it most is like it feels like a deliberate downer, like into nowhere, like a deliberate dead end.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. The whole movie kind of feels like deliberately unsatisfying.
Yes.
And I don't know why you'd make that choice, because you can have a bleak ending that feels satisfying. This is definitely not that. This feels like every decision was made, I don't want to say intentionally, because I don't really know what he was going for, truthfully. But it does feel like everything is very unsatisfying.
Okay. I was thinking this was due to incompetence, and you guys seem to think that this was...
No, I think this was done on purpose, to be underwhelming and disappointing.
There's definitely, like, the ending is very much deliberately nihilistic in a sense that ultimately the story kind of amounts to nothing, except that it inspires more crazy people to do other crazy things later. And then his story with Harley doesn't end up with him. I think part of the problem is he wants to like just end it here completely. So like we can't end with them running off together to go be Joker and Harley like you might expect in the future. It has to end. And it does feel pretty bleak and unsatisfying by design. He doesn't go out like the Joker who's accepting his own death because he's going to be something of a martyr or anything like that. He just gets stabbed by a crazy guy, and it all amounts to nothing. Ultimately, he broke it off with Harley. Ultimately, he also renounced the people that supported him in a sense. So like he's not going out or he pissed them off by not fully embracing the Joker. So ultimately, it ends in a very kind of thing. Very unsatisfying. I would say on purpose, but it's a little hard to know.
I was talking about this the other day, and Freddy Got Fingered was brought up, which is a film that is made with contempt, I think, for Hollywood, and that makes it likable for me. I mean, it's an acquired taste, but I think that movie is hilarious.
Yeah.
Whereas I think this was made with contempt for the audience, which makes me really not like. I don't like that approach. Like, I mean, I don't know. Yep.
It seems like this was made out of spite, but towards the audience or WB?
See, I think it's the audience actually in this case, not Warner Brothers. That makes me not like it. Like, I have a suspicion that Todd Phillips inflated the number in his head of people that like this movie for the wrong reasons. I don't think that's true. I think the most people that like Joker understand what it was doing, and they like it for the right reasons, and they understand that it's not meant to advocate Arthur's behavior or living in a state of chaos or anything like that.
It's not a movie for incels and blah blah and whatnot, or whatever the media spun on it. Yeah.
In the first movie, it's subtle, but the incorporation of Bruce Wayne is the antidote to that whole film. I think that's what I think is really key to making the whole thing work. And here, it's just my suspicion that Todd thought, oh, everybody worships this guy like he's awesome. I didn't want them to do that. So I'm going to make this film that sort of just hits rewind and and shows them all. You know, like that's something I heard buzz about that on like X and stuff, and I didn't want to believe it because I thought Todd Phillips is smarter than that. But this movie is it's so dull and it's such a downer that it actually feels like a fuck you in some regard to the audience.
I understand that reaction. I don't know if I 100% believe that. I'll just offer what it seems like to me is that he wanted a tragic ending for Arthur because he knows, and people who understood the first movie know that like that's not a super positive ending. Like he's caused a bunch of horrible chaos and he's achieved self-actualization, but it's horrible in some sense. And this is all kind of a tragic consequence of a horrible society and
horrible
people making the wrong choices and all that sort of stuff. And so the idea of that it ends in a tragedy seems to fit. Like that seems to make us a certain amount of sense. Even the idea that the people in the logic of the story, forgetting the meta sort of aspect to it, but in the logic of the story, the people that loved and worshipped him and saw him as like the figurehead of their movement might eventually turn on him. I think that's an idea that makes a certain amount of dramatic sense. And I'm not convinced, I guess, because it's in the very first movie. There seems to be an obvious acknowledgement that the people inspired by him are the ones like misunderstanding Arthur in a sense. And then in this, when he doesn't fully accept his persona, they turn on him. I think that all makes a certain kind of sense. But in defense of your argument, everything about the story is so underwhelming. He doesn't end up as a martyr. He doesn't end up completely, not that you'd want to cured or rehabilitated perfectly, but he doesn't even end starting down that path. If he did, I wouldn't feel like this is an insult to the audience. But because everything is so unsatisfying, like he just gets shanked in a hallway and that's it. It does. It feels very cynical, if nothing else. I didn't quite take it as an insult to the fans of the first movie, but he does seem perhaps insecure about being misunderstood again. Like he took it personally that so many people thought he made a movie that's pro incel terrorists or whatever. And that he's like, no, I got to really make sure people know that I don't think this is good. Like he took all the criticisms of the internet too personally and is too self-conscious about them. And so he had to like really double down to make sure that he doesn't see him as a heroic figure.
Yeah, go completely 180. Yeah.
I think that's totally fair. Like I can understand like that could be the case, that Todd just genuinely found value in telling a story about Arthur where it just ends with him being sort of pathetic and nothing and just has all these terrible things happening to him. And I don't mean to jump forward, but I'm hoping it doesn't matter, where we just see him dead on the ground. Like he saw something in that bleakness that he thought was valuable, and people could walk away out of the theater with a sense of being enriched in some dark way. But I just didn't feel, I don't know what I'm meant to walk away with. And I don't know what this contributes to the Batman universe. Like, I don't know. It's just like, okay, that was, I guess you saw something here, Todd, but like, I don't know what to grab from this. Like, it's so aggressively bleak.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just the bleakness, it's the aggression in it.
It does feel kind of nihilistic in the worst way, because I'm not sure what we're meant to take from it either. I'm not surprised that Arthur's story ends horribly. It seems like it probably ought to in some sense, but the way it happens here doesn't really deliver a lot of meaning. I don't feel like we learn a lot really in this movie for as long as we spend with his character in this movie. I don't feel like we learn a lot that we didn't learn in the first movie.
Yep.
And so I don't know what we're supposed to get out of him being stabbed, unceremoniously by someone we've barely seen in the whole film. He's not even killed by someone who feels betrayed necessarily by him renouncing his persona.
He doesn't get killed by Harley, which maybe would have made more.
That could have been something, right? No, that definitely would have been better. I feel pretty confident
than what we got. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
When I compare the endings of the two films, like the first one, I think is rich in symbolism and metaphor, but like that whole last little scene or sequence, where he's back in the hospital. Here, it just feels totally devoid of any kind of symbolism or metaphor. It just feels like he's dead now.
Yeah.
Like, all right. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yep. I said this in my review as well. What's the meaning of the first movie? That perhaps we should treat each other kindly. Treat other people how you want to be treated, because when a certain person gets inflicted tons of misery and pain and whatnot, they turn into something unrecognizable. What's the meaning of this movie? Arthur needs to be punished for his crimes. Kind of.
I don't even know if it's that. I don't even want to give it that much credit. Ultimately,
is that like I'm struggling to pin down
There's a theme about whether this is his like an alternate personality. That's an open question at the beginning, and by the end we go, no, that was him. That was part of him all along, and he's aware of it, and ultimately he doesn't want to be that anymore, and then he dies.
Mm-hmm.
What effect will this have on the world going forward? We have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea. Because I think about the ending of Taxi Driver, because I'm not one to say the Joker is a worthless ripoff of Taxi Driver. There are obvious similarities. It's definitely a similar type of movie in a good way. So we can use that as a point of comparison. Taxi Driver ends with him, and there's ambiguity in it as well, but there's a sort of a darkly ironic joke in that everyone thinks he was a hero when really he was a very messed up individual, right? So if this movie ended with people thinking he was a martyr, and there's a sort of ironic sense in which people view him, or like the effect he has on the world isn't really in tune with how he actually was and how tragic his life was and how messed up everything that happened to him was, that would be interesting. Like you would, I don't know. I don't know what
something, but the movie gives us nothing.
Yeah, honestly, I because at the end of this movie, what happens in the world of Gotham? What happens going forward? Can we reasonably assume anything?
Yeah.
What effect does any of this have?
And I'm not like, just because an ending is bleak, I mean, I can really like that sort of thing. Like, not
like the
it's
first
not a deal breaker for me. But I really want to like. I wanted to like the ending of this movie and its bleakness. I was thinking about it, going like, he was the Joker. He turned the city upside down, like, and now he's dead. What does that mean? What can I grab from that? And it's just like, I don't know what it is, and whatever it is, it's not as strong as what the ending of the first one delivered.
Yeah, and the ending one was definitely very bleak.
Yeah, right.
No, it was. But in the aftermath of this movie, he seems to have like the movement that he was inspiring. Is that going to fizzle out, or is that going to get stronger? I have no idea.
The first ending of the first movie was bleak, but you had Bruce Wayne that is now on this course to become a symbol of an agent of order. To like that manifests within absolute chaos. I mean, on the most important and fundamental level, thematically, the first movie I think was about the relationship between order and chaos. How a city can create somebody like Arthur, and then a person like that can just set everything on fire. And then in the absolute carnage, you have an agent of order like Batman that emerges from that to balance it out.
Seed that's going to emerge from all that. Yeah,
exactly. No, that'd be a fascinating way to take it. Like, you don't necessarily have to have like a guy fighting criminals, but maybe Batman becomes, I don't know, Bruce Wayne becomes some kind of mayor or some kind of forced to kind of put things into place after we see like an aftermath of something, just to
You might
balance that
expect
audience
Harvey
out.
Dent to play that part a bit more.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Entirely
Exactly.
underutilized, I would say.
Oh, I thought they were going to do something with this whole split personality.
They'll make a connection to Harvey Dent. Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting.
Like he's like, so tell me about this split personality kind of thing, and there's a kind of irony because he ends up having a split personality, but no.
Oh, now that you mentioned that, we did nothing, and there's a lot of potential there. Yeah.
I suspect that Todd Phillips has little interest in stepping foot that far into the comic book world. Like I don't really want to get into the establishment of Two-Face and shit like that. Let's just keep things as simple and grounded as possible, where it's just like, okay, the plot demands that we have a DA to sort of argue against Joker. Let's bring in Harvey Dent because why not?
The thing is, I think you can still bring in these comic characters, but still keep it super grounded. It just plays because, as I said, this is a 30-minute epilogue stretched out to 2 hours. So to me, it's just like you have all these creative possibilities. Like whether it's you, I'm not saying drench Harvey Dent in acid, and whatever, and have him shoot people. Well, you can play around with all these comic characters. Like you had Harley, but you didn't really utilize her much. And she had interesting scenes with Arthur, but he didn't do that much either. So it's more so a matter of not having like full-blown comic book moments, but just having characters, having something around with, because you do nothing.
I'm very glad you mentioned the Harvey Dent's whole Two-Face thing and how that seems like it would logically fit in with what we're attempting in this movie, and he just does nothing with it. He has him get half his face burned as if to go, see, we're doing comic book stuff.
Yeah.
Did you like that? Well, nothing happened of it. Like we don't see anything of the fallout of that, really. Was it a meaningful moment for his character? No. Did we get much of his character? No. He's a semi-competent, relatively young DA. And that's about all I really know about him. I think he could have been something of the agent of order in the story. Batman is too young still in this timeline, and he's a little on the young side too, which I found slightly distracting, or at least he looks rather baby-faced for the DA. But setting that aside, he entirely underutilized in this story. You might expect him to play that part.
Yeah.
To offer something of a vision of order and what should happen as a result. But all we really get, he's trying to get the death penalty for Arthur, and that's his whole thing. That's all there is to say about him, essentially.
Yep.
Actually, I didn't mind Harvey Dent's youthful appearance, but it surprised me that they did him getting his face damage in the end, because I was like, oh, I thought that was going to happen like a decade later or something. But like he's already fucking Two-Face, and he's like a 20-something guy.
To say that it's like a fraction of how meaningful it is in The Dark Knight is like the understatement of the century. Like there's so much more to be said about Two-Face in that movie than this. Like it's not. I don't get any sense of like who he is or that he has that darker side to him at all.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yep, exactly.
His face scarred up, I think, was just meant to be a fun nod to the fans.
Yeah. Which is a shame. I just wish this movie, took more opportunity to write some interesting characters, but no, it just seems to really focus on Arthur. Really focus on him not being the Joker, and that's about it. That's all the movie is really interested. Like, just undoing the first, and it just seems to be. It's like watching someone dig its own grave, really, and it's like, why don't you delve into the Joker stuff more? Does the Joker really necessarily need to be Arthur Fleck, or does it carry on into the people? Like Cap said, that can we see how this Joker stuff affected the city in its totality? But we kind of just really focus on Arthur and Arthur alone and his death, which just feels really cheap. And yeah, this was, I was quite bored watching this movie, especially through the second half. I think we're somewhere. I suppose we could skip, because we've talked a lot about the courtroom. We can skip somewhere in the middle. I do want to mention the grape scene.
Well, it's a pivotal moment as far as the movie's considered. Like that, I mean, that is a sharp transformation in Joker, and it feels way too abrupt and nonsensical to me.
And unmotivated. I really have no idea why we're meant to think that his character is capable of that. Whatever Gleason's character's name is, I don't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah, Jackie Sullivan, I think.
That came out of fucking nowhere.
What was the point? Like, I've seen people on X notoriously make fun of it. If only Batman knew how to stop the Joker, kind of stuff. I don't know.
It's an odd choice.
I mean, it's not exactly on camera, the abuse, but it's very heavily implied that he's violated sexually, and that could be just with like their billy clubs. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it was like full on.
When I saw it in the theater, I wasn't even quite sure that that's what was happening there. I thought maybe they were just beating him up, but then everyone started talking about it, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh. That
maybe it is. Yeah. That was my impression.
And then the following scene, he has his pants down. He's being dragged in his underwear.
Yeah.
And he's just got this absolute stunned look on his face. Like,
why is he? Are we meant to believe he's being raped this whole time, or just then because they were really mad at him? God, I'm so mad at you right now. Here it comes.
Yeah.
Like what?
I mean, not only does it feel like a severe overreaction on the part of the guards, like I just like, because they got pissed off when they heard Arthur talking on tape in the courtroom saying, "Oh, those guards are jerks." Like, he didn't even mention any of them by name. Like, none of them had their faces revealed. But I guess that was enough for them to. I don't know. I feel like at worst they would just like slap him around a bit.
Yeah,
you know? Like, fuck you, dude. Or even just be charitable to him, say like, whatever, he's just talking shit. It's not a big deal.
He's gonna die anyway, like, you know.
Yeah, let him vent.
It's a very odd.
He'll be back here in no time.
And then then that's a sharp turn, like you said. That ultimately, it almost seems like one of the biggest pivot moments in the whole story, where like suddenly he's like, I don't want to be the Joker anymore. What?
Yeah. And that is like a firm switch. Like, the Joker is turned off at that point in the movie. It feels like, and it's like he's not coming back after that.
He suffered like sexual abuse as a kid. This is the stuff that turned him into the Joker in the first place.
Yeah.
Why would it happen again? Why wouldn't he double down?
Right. Because two negatives make a positive.
No, the exact same thing occurred to me. Why wouldn't he lean harder into the Joker persona as a coping mechanism? Especially if he's like, this abuse reminds him of all the abuse that he suffered in the past. Like, I don't buy that he would shut off his Joker persona. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't follow.
He did say when he was getting, I'm going to say grapes for YouTube's sake, that he did say he was going to kill all of them, and I believed him. You know?
Yeah, right.
And
where
he
did
doesn't.
That go? Where did that?
Where did that go? Where is the violence? Where is the vengeance? You know,
you might expect if this was all established a bit better, and the story was something like, okay, at the end of the first movie, the Joker fully comes out, but Arthur's still in there, and then by the end of this movie, Arthur's not there anymore. There's something in that, perhaps. If the movie was sort of arguing that, like, you know, there's the part of him that's the Joker, but there's the part of him that maybe could still be Arthur and could still be rehabilitated. and then maybe by the end of this movie something horrific like that happens, and then it's just the part of him that like wants people to be happy and wants to make people laugh, and that part is kind of gone. It's destroyed by a cruel act of that sort. That would make way more sense than
two choices, but he's never given these two choices. Yeah.
But instead, that's enough to like what, scare him straight? I don't understand.
Yeah.
One more thing, because I know we're talking around the clock, so you know what? I won't bother going through the movie chronologically. I think the way we're doing is okay enough. I'll just mention some of the stuff that I think we really need to talk about, and I think Kat mentioned it somewhere in the beginning of the show. What was Harley's plan exactly? She encourages the defense lawyer to kind of back off, and then Joker fires his defense lawyer. Again, like the grape scene, it just seems ultimately unnecessary, pointless, a waste of time. I don't know what the thinking was behind that either.
Well, it's very unsatisfying in the end, but the idea seems to be something like he's been convinced by his lawyer to argue that the Joker is just a persona. It's a split personality even, and he's crazy. And in some sense, he's like renouncing the things he did as Joker, saying that wasn't really me. She's a super fan. She's one of the people that's inspired by the Joker and what he means to the movement. And so she doesn't like that, and neither does anyone else in the movement. So she's encouraging him to embrace the Joker and say, like, no, don't run from it. Don't renounce it. Like, you are the Joker. You really did those things. You're perfect the way you are. Eventually, he's like, you know what? You're right. God damn it. I'm going to fire my lawyer. Get out of here, bitch. And then he like kisses her randomly. But then he changes his mind. And she's like, well, I don't like you. I don't want to play with you anymore because you're not who I thought you were. The end. Like that's that story. I think the ending of that is very unsatisfying. If it ended with something like him either dying as the Joker, like after fully embracing it, saying, no, I'm not crazy. I did it on purpose. You do what you got to do. And then they kill him. And then he's a martyr to this movement that continues. Or whether he ends up breaking free and going off to become, the Joker you might expect. Either of those options would make more narrative sense, I would say. Ultimately, this is just very unsatisfying because they have a scene where he chases after her, catches up to her, and is like, hey, will you still be together? And she's like, you're not the Joker anymore. She starts singing. He's like, no, shut up. Shush, stop that. Which is kind of funny, but that's just the end of that story. She's like, nah, you're not who I thought you were.
I'd like to add to what you said about the potential endings there, because I had the exact same thought process about I was thinking if this were to have a good ending, like what would that look like? And I was thinking he's fully Joker, but he dies, but he started this whole thing that goes forward, right? That's one option. There's another option is he becomes the clown prince of crime, and maybe you see him behind like a desk or something. He's got Harley sitting next to him, and they're like the king and queen of Gotham's underworld. Like, I think either of those would have been better, but that's not to say I wanted either of those either. Like, I feel like Joker 1, I feel like that's all it needed to be. It should have just ended there. Like, I prefer the ambiguity of is he the actual Joker? Is he just some wannabe who eventually spawns the real Joker through his actions? Like, just that symbolism and that ambiguity and that sense of what happens next. I thought that was just the perfect place to end it. And anything else, there are better options to end this movie, but they're all sort of going to be, I think, a bit underwhelming.
Kill the mystery in the first one.
Right. Yeah.
You see, I do hear this criticism a lot that Joker, never should have had a sequel. It should have been a standalone movie, etc., etc. Like, I get that. I get it, but I'm more interested in exploring the possibility of, okay, what if the sequel was good? Because Hollywood is gonna Hollywood. Of course, they're gonna make a sequel to a movie that cost 50 million and made $1 billion. It doesn't surprise me the slightest.
That's an insane profit margin, by the way.
Yeah, WB didn't get much of that money because, interestingly enough, other studios financed it. Like, there were so many things going against the first Joker movie. People weren't necessarily for it. Oh, Joker shouldn't have the origin story. Oh, what the hell is this doing here? There was like all these kinds of stuff going against it. It was very well-financed movie either, even though it does look very good. And it was a hit success because it told a well-structured, well-crafted story. And in here, I don't know, I suppose they just didn't care. And I was very interested in a sequel. It didn't surprise me in the slightest that they were going to make a sequel because it made so much money, I suppose. I get it that maybe it should have. And after watching this, yeah, maybe they should have stayed with one movie.
I think of the endings that they could have had without rewriting the whole story completely. I don't think any of those are especially worthwhile, such that they necessitate making a sequel in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, if we just tweaked some things to make this better, you still might be like, okay, yeah, but the first one was pretty perfect. This is kind of unnecessary, even if it's decent. I would more opt for like a page 1 rewrite of this movie. There's a lot of changes. Like, for one, I think basing it around the courtroom trial of whether he'll be found not guilty by reason of insanity is just a large waste of time. Yes. Ultimately, especially if you're not going to flesh out what that even means. If he ends up, like, if we start the movie, he's found incompetent to stand trial, or he's already been found not guilty by reason of insanity, and he's in Arkham, and we just start there. Start with the effect that this has had on Gotham, knowing that he wasn't ultimately found guilty of his crimes. So, like, he lives on in the movement, and the movement, things are still brewing outside, and he's just living his life behind bars, and then he meets Harley, and then either they break out. Like, that could be more interesting. I'm not opposed to the courtroom drama, but so much of this story is preoccupied with whether he's going to be found guilty. I'm like, just get past that.
You just reminded me of something when Harley was announced to be in this movie. I'm pretty sure it was speculated that this movie was going to be about Harley Quinn, about her character, because Arthur's character arc is already complete.
Yeah,
in a way. So the only option you have in this movie is, okay, so he either digs down, triples down on Joker, or he resets back to Arthur Fleck. That's not very creative, but and this is the most interesting parts of him interacting with Harley. So we could see another character arc of a different character, making herself similar to Joker, or having the chance to be somewhat normal. I think that would have been a much more interesting way to go around it, I suppose. I don't know why they didn't do that. I guess, yeah.
To steelman the intention for this movie, it seems like the first movie was the rise of the Joker, and this is the fall, right? So obviously, looking past the end of Joker 1, there's no way any of this ends well. So that it ends poorly, tragically, horribly, doesn't really shock anyone. So, like, if this is a rise and fall type arc, I suppose that's the best version of what you could call this. But it's all in the execution. I just think they totally bungled it.
Yeah,
that's an interesting approach, or perspective, looking at it as the rise and fall. I actually quite like that. My issue with that is that if it's a Joker movie in the world of Batman, do you really want to tell a story about the fall of Joker before he's even really started the whole Joker thing?
I would
being the clown prince of crime.
Yeah, you'd like to see a little bit more of that, at least.
Yeah. I think out of the possible endings that we conceived here, I think him becoming a martyr is probably my favorite. But then, like, that idea of him starting something that's beyond him, that was already done.
Yeah,
in the first
we already
movie.
did it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. No, and it might have been more worthwhile to explore Harley instead of Arthur.
Honestly, yeah, I think a lot of people would have not liked that idea at first, but if it was really good, they would have been like, you know what? Actually, having the second movie be a Harley movie that Joker factors into would be cool, you know, because, you know, no one really felt the first movie was necessary until they got something really good. And they're like, actually, you know what? That was pretty hip. And so people might have said, oh, a Harley movie? Really? But then if it was good, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, they seem to be kind of angry at what they made, the Frankenstein monster they made in the first
or at
one.
least insecure about it.
Yeah,
At least
yeah.
like they have to prove something. You know, sometimes you watch a show for too long and you can tell the creators have been reading criticisms on Reddit. You know, like, no, you gotta tune that stuff out. You can't be listening to any of that. That's a bit what this feels like to me.
Yeah. Well, good thing about this
I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The good thing about this movie, it makes me like the first one even more. I'll probably rewatch it. What were you gonna say, John?
I don't know if I was dumb for expecting different, but like, just I saw the trailer and all the colorful actiony Joker stuff in the trailer. Like, I thought that was actually going to happen in the story because Gotham is in such a state of disarray after the events of the first film that the court system's fucked, the police are fucked, societies in general is fucked. There's no social fabric, and so that actually facilitates the possibility of Joker and Harley having their own highly produced variety show where they're both the hosts, you know, like in the trailer, or like he's walking around the courtroom bonking that guy in the head with the hammer. It's just like, fuck, like Gotham must be fucking batshit right now. No pun intended. And it's when I'm sitting in the theater realizing like, oh, this is all in his head, all this stuff because he's sitting in court and he's bored. Like that was such a letdown, and people were walking out of the theater, man. Like there wasn't a lot of people in the theater I was in to begin with, and like by the second or third musical piece, like they were walking out in droves, and I was just like, oh man, fuck. Like I get it, but I'm gonna watch this to the end. But like,
no, I think
I get it.
Because the first movie obviously had things that weren't really happening that were in his head as well, but there was some fun to be had in the ambiguity and not realizing or speculating on what was real and what wasn't. Everything that's taking place in his head in this is perfectly obvious, and there's no ambiguity about it. Unless I'm misremembering something, was there anything that happened that we went, oh, that didn't happen? Was there any of that? I don't remember any.
No, right. The sex scene with Harley in when he's in solitary.
I suppose there's that. That's a little ambiguous, I guess. Either it's ambiguous, or
I don't think it happened.
Allowed to happen. That's the only reason I think it didn't literally happen, because there's no fucking way they'd let her in there.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But then you have the question of, because I think she's talking with him on the phone. It's literally that scene where she draws the smile on the thing.
Which is a really cool shot in isolation, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where she tells him that she's pregnant. And it's just like, so is that scene imaginary as well? Because we know for a fact that solitary scene didn't.
Do we know that didn't happen, or are we actually meant to believe they just let her in? Because she says the guards let me in. I'm like, no,
they didn't.
Surely they didn't.
No, yeah, I mean, there's a few moments throughout the movie, that being one of them, where I was just telling myself, this is Gotham City and everything's fucked and people are half-assed, not doing their jobs properly. He probably got bribed or seduced by Harley.
That kind of thinking made me think that he'll get out somehow.
Right.
They need to justify the makeup somehow. Surely.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They absolutely didn't justify it. That judge reasoning was absolute crock of shit.
And so and you're not even rewarded for speculating about that, because ultimately what is the consequence of whether that moment did or did not happen? Like in the first movie, his whole relationship with Zazie Beetz, there's a payoff to that, and that's him going into her apartment and her being like, what the fuck are you doing here? You know, that's the consequence. And that's the reward for maybe you saw it coming and you're like, I knew it. Oh, that's great. You know, in the way that, like, whether you didn't see it coming until that moment or whether you did, it's still satisfying because there's consequences to it. And when she's like, you're Arthur, right? It's like, oh, fuck. But in this movie, what is the payoff to whether or not the pregnancy with Harley happened?
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the things that's frustrating overall about this film is you can't reliably take anything as actually happening. Because you have that one scene near the beginning where he's watching the TV with the other inmates in like the lounge area.
Mm-hmm.
And then he starts like dancing and walking around and looking at all the inmates. And then it hard cuts to him back at the TV, just sitting, staring, smoking a cigarette. And so it's like, okay, that didn't happen. And then throughout, it's like from there on, it's like, what else didn't happen? And
like, you're not rewarded for thinking about that either.
Yeah,
you could have fun with that narratively. There could be things of consequence that he thinks and we think happened, but didn't actually, that impact the story in meaningful ways. And yeah, when every musical number, or most of them, I think maybe with the one exception of when they escape and they're singing and dancing with each other, ultimately just to be caught again. Like that was happening, clearly. But a lot of the other ones are just in his head, and that gets old really quick. Which is a shame, I think, because a lot of those choreographed numbers and the music is pretty good. At least pretty good by modern movie musical standards. I found it refreshing. They had a sort of dark, sinister edge to them, but they felt very just laid on top of the story. Not connected.
Can you guys hear me still?
I can hear you. Your video is frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay, that's interesting. I seem to have a technical problem, but hey.
Turn off your camera and turn it on there again, or
I can't. Right, as soon as I go onto the tab, it just glitches out and I have a black screen. But as soon as I go on another tab, it seems to work. Interesting little technical difficulty. Hang on, I might just have to remove myself and join back in.
All right.
Yeah, you can go ahead, do that.
I think it's a shame. I feel some people I know, where the problems with the movie make themselves most plain is when the musical numbers happen, because that's when you realize how little has been accomplished right before it. Because they're like, oh, we're taking a break from that, but I wasn't even engaged in that.
Yeah.
And for me, it feels like the story is not serving the musical numbers well, because I kind of like them. I think they're neat. And I think that's where it feels like all the actual passion went into the movie. But, and I feel like the rest of the story has failed them in a sense.
Yeah, it's such a waste, because it's technically impressive in a lot of aspects. Like there's some great camera work. There's some of the lighting is like really well done.
Yeah.
I love some of the stage productions, like the costumes and the lighting of all that and the sets.
It would have been cool if that stuff was actually happening.
Right. Yeah. It's all wasted on stuff that has no momentum, or it's just not compelling. Like you were saying, it's a double helping of things not happening. So nothing happening in court, and we're cutting away to shit where nothing's still happening.
I think the one where that's most clear, we can see you again, but you're still frozen.
Damn it. But you guys can hear me, right?
We can indeed.
Yeah. Okay. That's weird. I don't know what to do about that. But
that's all right.
No worries.
See me either. And they haven't revolted yet.
We can talk. It's all good.
Yeah. I mean, at least you guys can hear me, so I guess I'll have to go off camera. That is weird. Maybe it's my camera problem. But hey, I'm glad it's still somewhat working. It's just a camera issue. But hey.
We were just talking about how like the anything that's technically impressive about this film in terms of cinematography and lighting is just all wasted on sequences that have no bearing on the story. You know, like all the musical stuff.
No, $200 million went into it, so I'm assuming, all right, something has to look good.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about the explosion and the bailing out?
It's surprising, but ultimately it felt like a repeat of the beat from the first movie, where the chaos he inadvertently creates gets him out of him being stuck. You know, where like at the end of the first film, he's in the cop car after shooting Murray Franklin, right? And then the carnage that he has created, an ambulance crashes into the cop car, and then a taxi gets upended, and then he gets freed after that. And this just felt like we're kind of doing that again,
but he's running away from it. Yeah,
and very drawn out, only to have him in the car and hear them talking about burning everything to the ground, and then deciding he doesn't want to do that, and then he leaves. Felt like, kind of went.
I think
kind of a dead end.
Well, I do like the sort of image that punctuates that sequence where he is running away from somebody dressed like him completely as the Joker. I do like that image of him running from his own shadow. That's quite a quite striking metaphorical image. But the problem is I just don't buy it on a practical level that somebody would chase him down that hard. Like he's like full speed, just sprinting at him like, "I love you, Joker." Like it felt like it too much it felt like that image was being forced, you know, unnaturally. It's a shame because I thought that was actually a pretty cool picture. This fully dressed Arthur, someone else dressed as the Joker chasing an unwilling Arthur Fleck.
You know what I'm just thinking? If we wanted, if while he was in Arkham, everything gets worse and worse and worse, and the chaos that he helped unleash, it just turns this city to absolute shit. And then when he finally either escapes or gets busted out, and he finally sees it for what it is and how ugly it's become. And like, if we want to do that sort of story where he will eventually turn his back on what he started, or, you know, that sort of thing, which we get a taste of in this, but not especially well executed. That would be more interesting if like he sees all the people suffering. Oh, there you are. Welcome back. If he sees all the suffering that this has unleashed in the world, and he kind of sees the suffering and chaos of his early life inflicted on innocent people who were just going about their normal lives, and now are subjected to like anarchic violence all the time now, that could be something. Like, that could be a motivation for perhaps turning against the thing he created. But as is, he hears two guys in a car talking about how they're going to burn everything down, and he's like, I don't want that, even though he clearly wanted that at the end of the last movie. So I don't get it.
The thing is, you could easily set this stuff up, because, you know, we get certain events scene to scene from court day to court day, and you could easily include scenes of people watching the broadcast after each and every day. You could, you know, have them getting angrier and angrier as they find out more about Arthur, how the way he's been treated. Maybe they kind of sympathize, you know, now that they've been explained his story, and all it manages to do is radicalize people more against how society is built up in general, or what have you.
If Harley has allies that she's like recruiting to help maybe break him out, or, you know what I mean, if she's working with people
like a PR fight or something like that, you know, I think establish a context.
With a different course of events, you could, I think, successfully put Arthur in a state where he is disillusioned by the idea of a revolution, where like he doesn't want it anymore. But what the movie did doesn't work. Like the guards violating him is not enough for that to happen. I don't think it makes sense to me. And I think whatever does happen to facilitate that, I think it should involve Harley, because that relationship just seems so core to the film And I feel like that is the one thing, that sort of element of love in his life finally, that would do something to affect him deeply, to like change his state radically. Maybe she falls out of love with him beforehand, and then that's what sort of reshapes his thinking, but not the guards.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't buy it.
Yep. One more thing I wanted to mention that kind of important. I hear a lot of people speaking positively about the scene where it was the scene with Gary Puddles. Puddles was his name?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we learned that his last name was Puddles.
Yeah. What did you guys think about that scene in particular? Because honestly, like, I don't see much utility in it. Like, the part where Gary is just speaking his mind and saying how much that murder affected him, it wasn't really impactful to me because Arthur just kind of flippantly replies. Like, he doesn't seem to affect him much. He doesn't seem to care. You know, I'm not sure how the scene wants me to feel. So I'm not sure why this scene is complimented. Like, what
I think
what does it manage to achieve?
What it's worth complimenting for is establishing that, like, oh, he thinks he let Gary go because he was nice and he didn't do anything wrong to Gary, but then ultimately he's faced with the very real traumatic effect this had on Gary. Like, you know what I mean? You thought you spared him, you thought you didn't do anything wrong to him, but then you're faced with Gary who's like, this has kind of ruined my life, man. There's something interesting in that. I don't know if I like the way Joker responds. Obviously he's defensive.
That bugs me, his response.
You can tell he's kind of, it gets under his skin a little bit, but ultimately, compared to all the other things that we're going to argue turns him against being Joker, this seemed like one of the least important ones. Like, especially when he's like, Puddles, your name was Puddles the whole time? Ha 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 ha.
That's all you have to say to him? Really? Like
I don't know if it's I don't know. I certainly didn't enjoy the scene as much as some people did. I've heard people argue it's like one of the few good scenes in the movie or something along those lines. And I suppose there's an idea there that I like, but that's about it.
Yep.
I think with different execution, that could have been something that contributed to his disillusionment with the revolution, kind of like we were talking about with like Harley playing a role in that. Gary could have played a role in that as well, because like Gary is somebody I think Arthur really respected.
Yeah.
And like to hear Gary talk about how terrified he was by Arthur, I think hurts him, but not enough in the scene.
Yeah,
like I thought the dialogue from Gary was strong, and the performance was strong. I think that's why people are praising it. But like, it was kind of just bogged down for me by the stupid accent that he was doing, and just not reacting enough. And then that doesn't actually end up having any consequence on his actions going forward.
It just that's the biggest problem for me. The lack of a meaningful consequence as a result. And if we ended with him at least on the path towards rehabilitation, I suppose that's an ending that could be interesting. And this would probably have to be one of the more meaningful moments in that arc. But it felt like it wasn't given the importance it's due.
Yep.
Compared to like him being graped and the other stuff that happens. Him getting in the car with those guys, hearing them say, "We're gonna burn it all down." He's like, "I don't want this anymore." Like that's almost given more weight. It's strange.
Yep. I am Andrew with a very generous super chat, $9.99. I think the repercussions of his actions in the form of the psychological damage he caused to Gary and the death of Ricky awoke him from the escapism that Joker persona offered him. And I wish
a little bit.
Right. But for that escapism from the Joker persona, there needs to be more stuff thrown at it in order to make it viable. Right now, all we have is Grape, and what else do we have? We have Gary Puddles. That disillusions him a little bit. We have a long time I don't think there's enough in this movie to justify him being disillusioned. and if there is, it's not really used to its fullest, you know.
No, well, it feels like things go in the wrong direction after the abuse. I would think now he's like totally the Joker. Now he's like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And then the bomb goes off, and then he escapes, and then he's like fully embraces like being the Joker 100%. I would buy that way more. Like what it did here with him turning this Joker persona off after that feels like just banging a Yui on the highway into oncoming traffic.
It's definitely not satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, where the fuck did this come from? If this is the route you want to go, this could have been set up an entirely different way, or it should have been.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the creators are scared of the first movie in a way. Like, yeah, they read Reddit too much. Never read Reddit. Yeah. It's so disappointing.
This moment should have had more of an impact on what happens after it, and it should have been given more weight, and there should have been more things reinforcing it. As is, it feels a little thrown in, you know, like it feels thrown in. That's the simplest way of putting it for me.
What about I forgot about Zazie Beetz, her character. And she was talking about how she met Arthur's mother, and I was like, did you now meet Arthur's mother? And she apparently told her how he was crazy. Like, a lot of this movie is just yeah, I know we're recapping the first movie. That's interesting and all, but I don't know why they summoned her, especially like that courtroom scene was in particularly not useful.
I don't remember learning anything at all from that. If there was something new established in that scene, I don't remember it. It just felt like, because everything with the trial made no sense to me. So I don't know what she's there to testify on behalf of, or what they're even arguing with her. It felt very superfluous to everything that was happening to include her. I guess for that brief moment, I'm like, oh, they brought Zazie Beetz back. That's cool.
Yeah, and you have the therapist as well in there. Like these should be memorable scenes, but for some reason they just completely go down the memory hole, and I can't remember what their purpose was. I think they read a little bit of a journal as well. Yeah,
I'm just so annoyed with the whole thing the movie sets up being a question about like what it means to be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Like, can you be so insane or mentally ill that you are not really responsible for your crimes? That's something of a question that the movie raises with this issue. And then, like, I don't feel like we learn anything about that. Like, do we get any meaningful answers about what it means, like, to how do we punish, how do we hold accountable people who are this mentally ill for the horrible things they did? Did we come to any conclusions about any of those issues? I'm not sure we did. I would like, it could be interesting to explore those concepts, because that's an interesting question. Like whether it's, you know, like what the purpose of the justice system is, you know what I mean? Like broadly speaking, like what does justice look like for Arthur?
Yeah.
Ultimately. And the movie's answer is entirely unsatisfying. He doesn't really seem concerned with the issue of the justice system and how it treats these cases at all.
Right.
And so all these trial scenes where we're bringing back people from the first movie to basically recount things we already know, only to establish that, yeah, he probably is guilty. And ultimately that was never really in question. Really? Like the movie sets it up like, oh, maybe he had an alternative personality, but no one who watched the first movie believes that. Arthur doesn't believe that. And then ultimately that he's not found not guilty. So I don't know.
You're exactly right. Because like, why focus on something that you're not going to pay off? Like you set this whole two-persona thing up, and it just, at the end of it, it's a nothing burger. So why focus on it so much throughout the movie? It does feel like a massive waste of time when you could do a number of productive stuff, like explore Harley Quinn, like explore Harvey Dent, or afterwards just prison life. Because there was one scene where all the prisoners were singing. I was hoping there was going to be a scene like that from watching the trailer, but they don't do much with it. Like, yeah, the prisoners kind of sung that song, then what? You know, it doesn't. Nothing just seems very consequential in this film.
You might expect more like closing arguments from Harvey Dent, sort of arguing why it's important, despite all the horrible things that have happened to him in his life, why it's important that he be punished. You know what I mean? Because you know, it's about deterrence, and it's about trying to bring back order to a city that's falling apart. We can't allow society to think that because horrible things happen to him that he's not a monster. You know, like these sort of arguments to come up in the course of the story. And like, you know, you might expect the defense to lean heavily on like, well, he's, you know, he's the product of his environment. So like, what does it mean to put him to death for something that society did to him? Like, it all seems like it's just in the service of this specific issue of whether or not he has a split personality that he blacks out when going between or not. And that doesn't, I don't know.
Anytime in the trial that they cut away to clips of the first movie, that felt really cheap to me.
Yep.
It's sort of like when a TV show has like a clip episode. Like, here's the best scenes from season 1, you know? Like,
remember when he danced in the bathroom?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
Remember these scenes from the Superior movie that came out before? Well, you're watching this now.
We're not even reassessing them. We're just establishing them again for the sake of the argument in the courtroom.
Yeah.
An argument that goes nowhere.
Right.
Was this really the best idea to have a courtroom drama? I mean, it's a choice, but
like
all it really does.
If they're interested in some of these questions, I would support it. You know, I could see the potential in the courtroom drama musical. It's an odd combination that could work, but it didn't seem interested in any of the important questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. No. One thing I wanted to add as well. I didn't notice this on my watching it, but apparently the guy who stabs him towards the end cuts a smile into his face in the background while the shot is focusing on Arthur lying on the ground.
Either that or he licked the blood off the blade. It's out of focus and it's hard to tell. But the implication seems to be that he did the Glasgow smile or whatever they call that, which I feel like, I don't know. There's other ways of doing it without just kind of aping the Dark Knight a little bit. But it seemed entirely unnecessary. But
it felt like a little wedged in for the fans, like, oh, he could be the real Joker. But I was thinking about it. I'm like, would he like immediately sit down and do that after doing that thing? But then it kind of made a little bit of sense to me, actually, because if he considers this guy the Joker, like the symbol, the avatar that sort of launched this revolution, and then he's like, oh, you're not the guy I thought you were, and kills him, and then it's like, I have killed who everybody thought was the symbol of revolution, and now I'm the real Joker, and then decides to strikes him suddenly like, oh, I should just cut a smile in my face.
That would make more sense to me if, let's say, the bomb goes off in the courtroom, he goes on outside, puts on some makeup, but they riot a bit in the streets, and then someone randomly approaches him, stabs him, and does. I think in a setting like that, it'd make more sense. But because he's deflated, he's given up on being Joker. Someone is visiting him in prison. You know, he doesn't know whether we don't even know if the verdict is going to resume or not. You know, that's kind of in the air. We just know that he's back in prison, so it's kind of like a more sedated, calm environment where this happens, and that just seemed. Yeah, tacky, bizarre to me. Yeah.
they don't establish that guy is like gung-ho about the movement, really. He just seems to be a different kind of psychopath who's just there. It almost feels like, okay, if you're watching like a whodunit or whatever, and then the ultimate reveal is that it was someone we haven't established at all in the story, you'd be like, what? Like, come on, I thought it was supposed to be someone I could guess. You know what I mean? Or at least something that they established more, because he's thrown in at the end. We've seen him in other shots in the movie, but we know absolutely nothing about him. He's just there looking on sometimes.
I was like wondering, why is this guy smiling, watching in the background? Like, there's some shots in this movie, like specifically focusing on him, and I was like wondering, what's this guy's deal?
Who the fuck is that?
Yeah. Why are we focusing on him? And by the end, like,
yeah, when
a real Joker.
when the foreshadowing is so small and brief like that, it just sticks out as like, what's that doing there? I think a better setup would be to have like them exchanging a bit of dialogue. You know?
I just think it would have been so much better if it happened in the streets, in some sort of riot, in some sort of crazy environment, and then you could have him go out like that. Like, they were rioting so much they didn't even notice Arthur collapsed and is dead on the ground, kind of thing. Like,
I like the idea of like him, like sort of fully embracing Joker, escaping the courthouse, attempting to be at the top of the pile, like the king of the chaos he's wrought, and that very same chaos is uncontrollable and kills him.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of historical stuff, historical precedent behind that. I think that happens like that. Like, we didn't even notice a lot of people dying in the stampede. Yeah, I think that would have been a much better way. But instead, we're just kind of isolated and trapped in courtroom scenes in this jail. It just feels very narrow.
And just in terms of the execution of that scene, they're like, hey, Joker, you got a visitor, or you got a call, something like that. And then the guard walks way ahead of him so this scene can happen. You know what I mean? Like, it felt very clumsy in the execution. Maybe he's in on it. I don't know. If he's not in on it, it's just very convenient that he decided to walk so far ahead of him. Like, come on, follow me, and then walk like a few corners around the building. It felt very clumsy as well. And then we're going to end just looking at his face. It just felt very nihilistic and tacked on. I don't know what I'm meant to gain from this other than I guess someone else is going to take up the mantle. It's that guy from earlier. Remember Guy? He was there.
Yeah.
When you say nihilistic, it's not as in the writer is being nihilistic with the story having on me. Not as in, because in some sense you could argue that Arthur Fleck has kind of embraced kind of like a nihilism, like nothing matters, I can do what I want. It's more so coming from the writer, like, Arthur's role in the story doesn't matter, kind of thing.
It's more of a narrative nihilism, if you will. Like, the ending felt very meaningless to me. I don't know what we're even meant to draw from this. It felt empty of meaning in a real sense. You know, nihilism can mean a few different things. One of them is just extreme pessimism. There's definitely a lot of that in this movie. Ultimately, what becomes of his story? Does he find redemption? No. Does he go on a path towards what would you say? Like
chaos,
reconciliation, or does he go down a path of chaos? Does he become a martyr? Does he ultimately get killed by the movement that he started? No, it's just some guy who we know nothing about just unceremoniously stabs him in a hallway, and now he's dead. The end.
Like, they've had 5 years. Like, the Joker 1 released in 2019. 5 years later, they had 5 years to figure this shit out, and they come out with this. Like, come on.
It is like this is the best you got, really.
We've had a 2-hour discussion that we've discussed multiple things they could write, because that's the beauty of writing. You have a lot of possibilities, and somehow they went with a possibility that is the most unsatisfying, the most botched, the most what the hell was that?
Confused
kind of thing. Yes,
because I I think I know what they were going for, but I can't even say for sure a lot of the time.
Okay, I guess we can get to the closing thoughts. John, would you recommend this movie?
Would you recommend it, John?
No, man, I wouldn't. I mean, I wish I hadn't seen it. Like, I mean, I was obviously always going to, because I can't just leave that hanging. I've got to experience it if it's being released. But like, I just remember thinking, like, fuck, I wish this wasn't in my head now, because like Joker 1 was just great. That was all I needed it to be. It didn't need to go on any further than that. And just felt contemptuous with some of that. I feel was directed towards the people who enjoyed the first one. And I think that's because Todd thinks they liked it for the wrong reasons, that it's become, he felt that the first one became one of those films that people respect. They take the wrong message from it. Like, you know, Fight Club or Falling Down or fucking Scarface, or just one of those Patrick Bateman for American Psycho, just all these movies that depict these sort of,
he's literally me.
these social reclusive types, like severely antisocial, like internalized rage sort of thing. Like I don't think he wanted to have made a movie that contributed to that, where, you know, you have all these people cosplaying as the Joker and dancing go to the actual steps and dancing, and it's just like, you are celebrating the guy. Like, no, I didn't want that.
John, like, honestly, I want to cosplay as the Joker.
It's a cool costume. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah,
I would consider dyeing my hair green, even though it'd probably damage it. But hey, does that make me a virgin? Oh, whatever. It's. You're completely right. I think they got scared of what they created, of the kind of monster they created. Cap, would you recommend this movie?
No, I wouldn't. I think the best the movie has to offer is all the technical stuff and the songs. However, the story's not serving the songs. The songs aren't especially serving the story. So as much as I enjoy some of them, and I like the set design, and some of the music is actually quite good. The story, totally underwhelming at best. It is a big step down from the first one. So I think it's disappointing already. I think you'd be crazy to argue it's on par with or better. Even if you think the story is okay, this is a major disappointment compared to the first one. And I think the story is the most important bit, and that was where all the problems are in the movie. I don't think I hated it as much as other people do. I didn't quite take the same contempt read as some people do, though I understand it. It reeks more of insecurity to me. That I don't want people to get the wrong idea about what I think about the Joker. I got to make it very clear that this was bad and that it ends bad. So ultimately,
that could be a better way of putting it. Sorry to cut you off there. I just think that idea of him being insecure, that's really valid. I didn't consider that. That's probably better.
Both seem viable to me. I don't know him well enough to know, but I suppose there are some funny little isolated jokes that kind of work. It's a little funnier than the first one in some sense. There's more, like, just to highlight one silly moment that I kind of enjoyed. They talk a couple times about the TV movie they made about his life and his story. At one point, Zazie Beetz is on the stand and she mentions that terrible TV movie, and so Arthur looks to Harley like, no, it's not terrible, was it? He does with his eyes, and she's like, gives him a little look like, no, it was good. Don't listen to her. And he has this kind of like, okay, cool, just making sure. Like, little moments like that are kind of funny.
Yeah,
there's a little life that gets breathed into the movie once he regains his mojo briefly for like maybe 30 minutes in the middle of the movie, where it feels like, that feels more like where I thought we'd start the film. So like, it's not all awful, but it's a mess, to put it nicely.
Cap, do you remember, you just reminded me that this is one of my favorite scenes. I think this is one of my favorite scenes, where I think it was actually Tim Dillon I
Oh,
can't remember.
yeah, I forgot to mention it, yeah.
And he was asking for an autograph on the book.
Yeah.
And then he just like whispered, "This is gonna be worth a fortune when they fry his ass." And he just writes, "I hope you die of cancer." I just found that like that's such a Joker Arthur Fleck thing to write.
Yeah,
For him. I think that's very in character. I
There's
think
little
for him to-
bits of enjoyment to be found in the movie, but the story's a mess. Very underwhelming, very unsatisfying. I think I could be convinced that the story is actively bad, but at the very least, it's only mediocre. So big disappointment. Couldn't really recommend it. Maybe watch a couple isolated musical numbers on YouTube eventually and go, oh, that's kind of fun. Look at that. Look at them tap dancing, having a good time. And that's all that's really to be gained from it.
Yeah. Would I recommend it? No. To answer in short. The thing is, I really like the first movie. So going into this one, you see, normally I'd be very angry. You know, we get this all the time with all sorts of franchises, whether it's Indiana Jones and stuff. So normally I'd be very. Right now, I just feel disappointed.
I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.
yeah, exactly. I just feel sad, you know, at this point. It's just like, yeah, of course you're gonna botch it in the sequel. Yep, of course you're gonna.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's slightly less insulting when they tear down a villain instead of a hero. You know?
Yeah.
Upset you in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's why I'm just more so sad rather than angry. Yeah, I'm just like, okay, whatever. We still have the first movie, you know, so you got to look at the positives, I suppose. Anyway, we'll round up the show. John, would you like to plug any of your stuff? We have all the links to people's social media stuff in the description below. If you'd like to check these guys' lovely work, then you can go in the description below. So, John.
Sure, yeah, thanks. John Graham on YouTube. I do a show called RB and the Chief and some Machinima stuff with video games. And I used to work for machinima.com years ago. So I'm just doing that stuff independently. I just put out a video on a game called Pools for PC. It's sort of a liminal space sort of thing. The toys play that, and they've sort of discussed the game, and antics ensue. So that was the last thing I put out, and I've got a bunch of other stuff cooking. So yeah, John Graham on YouTube. Thanks.
Cap?
I would like to plug John Graham's stuff. You can find him, John Graham, on YouTube. He used to work for Machinima. He's got a new video about a game called Pools and his antics. And you should go check that out. John Graham on YouTube.
What are you working on, Cap?
Well, let's see. I'm working on the next episode of the Devs review. If you've never heard of Devs, good on you. It's a really terrible sci-fi show that I've been very, very slowly reviewing on the channel. And then I have a big video coming out soon about a particular, you might have seen this making the rounds, a sort of Sweet Baby Inc. game dev presentation. So we got a little reaction video to that, because I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of storytelling and politics and all that sort of fun stuff. So that's coming out soon. That'll be a nice chunk of a video, like an hour and a half, something like that. So that's what I have in store. You can find me on YouTube in the links below. We also do live streams every Sunday on all sorts of fun topics. So come hang out if you like this sort of thing.
Yeah. Also, thank you everyone so much for watching. A good number of you guys have stayed tuned in. As for me, do I have anything to show? You see, normally I was just filling out, gonna do a Joker 2 review, you know, gonna chat it on a big live stream. And now I don't have anything to look forward to. So now there's a void, there's a kind of emptiness.
Have you been watching the Penguin show so far?
I haven't seen episode 3. I haven't seen it yet. I have seen 1 and 2.
But you've seen the first 2? Yeah.
Pretty good.
I've been enjoying that so far. That's a fun.
Yeah.
It's nice to have something good.
Would you guys be interested to talk about it once it finishes? Maybe.
I'm down. How many episodes are there going to be?
I have no idea.
Well, whenever that does finish, I definitely will be watching the whole thing, and yeah, let me know.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
Yeah, if I'm
All right.
available around that time, then yeah, I'm on board with that.
That'll be something I can look forward to, I suppose. And yeah, I suppose I should plug my Joker review. I spent like a good 7 hours writing notes, editing, and trying to render it. And it's one of my lowest reviewed videos on the channel. So it's just like, damn it! Sometimes I feel like trapped into making meme videos because that's what people watch on the channel. But hey,
I wouldn't know anything about that. I don't think John and I would know anything about that at all. You're on your own there.
So yeah, I spent a lot of time making this review. So check that
Go
out.
check it out.
I pinned it in the chat.
Check it out.
Yeah. Thanks, Cap. It make my day, just to get those numbers up. I mean, we're YouTubers. We just like look at those numbers and just like, oh, sense of happiness.
Numbers go up.
Yeah. But hey, you win some, you lose some on YouTube. I fully accept that.
Thanks for having us for a chat about it.
No,
I don't know if I would have had the chance to talk about it on any stream at all. So I'm happy to be able to talk about it. Thanks for having me.
I always enjoy discussing with you guys movies.
Oh, sure.
Because I live in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a lot of normal people. I don't get to hang out with many nerds, so yeah, I appreciate these conversations, even though I might not be the best speaker, kind of live host.
Oh, stop! You're doing great.
But hey,
you're doing great.
All right,
did fine, man, and I appreciate you inviting me on too. Thank you very much. I enjoy these discussions too, these in-depth sort of things. I can't do this with everybody. I'm sort of the same. Like it's only know online people that want to have these kinds of talks.
All right, we'll round up the show there. Thank you, everyone, again so much for watching. Bye.
See you later, everybody. Thanks.
Goodbye.